Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome. It's Tuesday. It's time for the Adventure Prep stream. I feel like it has been 500 years since we have done one of these. What's going on, everybody? How you doing? It is good to be here. Yeah, I'm trying to think what's going on. I just got a cool package like an hour ago, and I haven't really had much of a chance to play with it yet. But it is... Boom, the Canon. This is a new camera that I just bought. It has a model and a make, and it's a kind of an older one. It's like a Canon. Here it is. The M50. I knew that. I remember knowing it when I looked it up. But it's a nice new camera. I haven't had a chance to play with it yet. But hopefully I'll be able to configure it so maybe I can use it for streaming. Mainly I'm buying it to do some recording for a new video series that I'm bringing back. But I can also probably use it for thoughts, which would be cool. We haven't done thoughts in a while, and it'd be cool to get back to doing those. So yeah, it's cool. I like it. I haven't put the strap on it yet, but it's cool, and I'm excited to use it. But the battery's still charging, so I haven't really had much of a chance to mess with it. But that is okay. Yeah, otherwise, it's pretty good. Tonight, I've got a home game that I'm excited about. That's going to be fun to do. I've been kind of working on a lot of maps lately for that home game, which has been cool. I really fell down like a mapping wormhole the other day, and sometimes I hyperfixate on doing a map, and I just want to listen to an audiobook and just blaze through a map. So I've been rereading Fire and Blood, which is the like extremely boring history of Westeros by George R. R. Martin, and boy, it's exactly what I like to eat. It's my preferred, it's my favorite enemy, because I get to read about cool world building without having to worry about anybody's like feelings or descriptions or weird George R. R. Martin sex scenes, and I can just ingest all the cool names and all the cool plot stuff, and that's all I want. I'm a weird world building pervert, and that's what I like to ingest. But that's not what we're talking about today. No. Today we are talking about the Feywild, more specifically the Wild Beyond the Witchlight. I have not talked about this campaign in a little bit here on the stream, but things went a little south. They went a little sideways last session. Let me try to catch up to speed. So the characters are currently in, boy, I always get the names mixed up. Thither, which is, I believe, the forest domain of the three kind of like splinter realms of Prismeer. And they are currently wrapped up in a plot involving Will of the Feywild and Skabath the Nightshade, and also the I have these child catchers, these kind of like spooky sort of ghoul-like monsters that are running around. And during a fight, during an engagement between these... Hey, what's up, David? Thanks for coming. During an engagement between the Fey... between the Will of the Feywild and his kind of like wild children, these sort of like immortal lost boy pastiches in my version of Prismeer. During a battle between them and the child catchers, one of the characters died. One of the player characters died, which is the first time that has happened in a game. The party just failed to get to them in time, failed a couple of necessary medicine checks, and they failed their third death saving throw and perished. And that's roughly where we ended the session. The players, who are anywhere between 11 and 13 years old, took it pretty well. They were interested, they were like engaged, and the player sort of was smiling the whole time, which is a good sign. But yeah, I don't know exactly what that means in the context of this. I know that Wild Beyond the Witchlight has some kind of rules about it. I remember reading them and not being particularly inspired. But what's more important is that it kind of has to play into the things that we've already established about how Prismeer works. So I have changed some of the kind of fundamental plot details of Prismeer. We'll hint at some of those today, but it doesn't matter too much exactly what I've done with it, I don't think. But what I would love to do in the stream is to kind of hash out, how death works here, what's going on when you die, where do you go. I would love to do kind of a little side quest for this dead character. They're kind of they're a great person. They're a great player, but they're a little bit shy. They don't really put themselves out there very much. They're definitely not the shyest member of the party. I would say that they are the penultimate shyest member of the party. But they often will sometimes in combat just kind of like stand around. And I ask them, like, what does your character do? What does Cyrus get up to? And they're like, I think Cyrus will just stay here. And it's like, really? Your party's in danger. They could really use your help. Like, they will sometimes get in and mix it up depending on their mood, but a lot of time it feels like they just kind of like, oh, I don't know, I'll just wait until the combat's over. So I like the idea of isolating them, kind of sending them to some sort of a Feywild afterlife that they have to contend with in order to return to the party, hoping that will kind of draw them out of their shell a little bit. But let's talk about what we already know about the Feywild afterlife, and then we can kind of go from there. So there are 5 important things to keep in mind as we are brainstorming this. We'll run through those right now. So the first thing is that the way I've done this in the past is that when the characters begin making death saving throws, I describe the surrounding greenery, vines, flowers, roots, that kind of a thing, beginning to grow and wrap around them. The idea here, I don't know where the notion came from, but I didn't like the idea of the first time someone went unconscious in the Feywild of describing that, like, oh, you see them bleeding out, that their blood is running over the ground and they're, slowly turning pale, and the kinds of normal things you do when a character is unconscious and like sliding towards death, right? I wanted it to feel a little bit more fairy tale, a little bit less severe, because I just didn't know how some of these players would take the idea of their character being unconscious. I have seen adult players who are playing for the first time begin to weep when they start making death saving throws because they are worried that their character is going to die and they don't understand the stakes. So I just didn't want it to sort of come to that. So off the top of my head, I kind of improvised this idea of the surrounding, flora almost beginning to claim them. So there is kind of like a time pressure thing you have to do before they get entirely wrapped up or whatever, but I never knew what that meant. I just sort of assumed, okay, this is some other condition, some other thing. I think on some level I tied it to, I think, our third point here, which is that when Fey creatures die in Prismeer, they burst into leaves. And so similarly, I wanted kind of an arch, sort of over-the-top fairy tale kind of consequence for killing in this world. I didn't want it to feel like blood and gore that's like off tone. I liked the idea that all of these fairy creatures, all of these, satyrs and centaurs and, brownies and stuff, that when you kill them, instead of them dying traditionally, they just kind of like disintegrate into leaves. And it's unclear whether that means that they, are teleported somewhere. It's unclear whether that means that they are actually destroyed or whatever it is. But the notion of like corpses strewn across the Feywild just didn't quite work for what I wanted. So I think that's kind of where my brain was going with the, the surrounding like greenery starts to grow over your body. So then the natural consequence of that is that recently in the last session, when Cyrus, who was unconscious, failed their final saving throw, I described the earth kind of just like growing around them and like the vines and the ivy pulling them down into the earth. And after a moment, they're gone, right? There's nothing left. They're just swallowed by the earth. Which again feels, cool and kind of naturey, but I didn't immediately know what that meant, and I still kind of don't. I have some like rough ideas, but that's basically what we're working with, is that one member of the party has been swallowed and has disappeared into the earth. Oh, we should add one more thing. But let me talk about these other two first. This one is more of just like a general lore point that might come in, might not. I'm not sure. So the Hourglass Coven, those are the 3 hags who are the primary villains of the adventure. Endolin, Bavlorna, and Skabatha. Plus, in my version, their sister Tasha, who is the same character as Eliwick Tumblestrum and Igwiliv and a bunch of other characters like that. They're all the daughters of Zybilna, who, spoilers for Wild Beyond the Witchlight, is actually the same character as Tasha. I'm doing it differently, where Zybilna is their mother, and all 4 of the daughters are her children. And the conceit is it's kind of a Cinderella thing, right? Where like Tasha is the adopted child, whereas Endlin, Bavlorna, and Skabatha are her natural-born children, and they're covetous and grasping and kind of Lear-esque. They divide up the kingdom into multiple parts, right? And they have plotted against Zybilna, and they have frozen her in time in the Palace of Heart's Desire, which is the kind of central final dungeon of the campaign. Meanwhile, Tasha was on the material plane while all this was going on, and then returns to find it this way and knows that she needs heroes to come and help her, and so she recruits the party. And so they're working to undo what Endlin, Bavlorna, and Skabatha have done. So it's very similar, but just some of the parts moved around because I don't really care about like D&D continuity and who Igwiliv and Tasha actually are. It doesn't matter to me. So that's kind of the narrative there. How that comes in, I only have one thought, but we can talk about that. And then lastly, my players are 11 years old. So anything we come up with for the afterworld has to be sort of suitable. It can definitely be creepy and spooky, like that's fine. But just in terms of content, we want to try to keep it from being too grim, I think is the right tone, right? Like it's okay if it's scary, it's okay if it's spooky, but I don't want like bleakness. I still want it to feel kind of vibrant and fun, even if it's spooky. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with all of those. God, I was just talking when I wanted to add another one, and now I don't remember what it was. Shoot. Oh yeah, that's what it is. It's like how they might potentially rectify this. So the party has a plan on how to bring Cyrus back by working with the Getaway Gang, who are the kind of like Lost Boys analog. The characters can ask a favor of the unicorn at the Wayward Pool, potentially to bring Cyrus back. Okay, cool. All right. So the idea is that there's a unicorn a short distance away at the Wayward Pool, who I feel like the rest of the adventure kind of treats as though they are in some way not quite a god, but has sort of like divine godly power, right? And the idea is that if they can, excuse me, if they can, I don't know why I was Yonder in the stream so much. I'm talking? I'm not sure. If they can bring back, if they can go to the unicorn and in some way help it out, then the unicorn will bring back Cyrus. So I'm hoping that Cyrus is only gone for like a session or so. I don't think I want this to be like an extremely long thing. The character of Cyrus is a tiefling monk. Cyrus is a tiefling monk who is more interested in books and learning than she is in fighting. So the idea that I have for what the Feywild afterworld is like, and this might just be Prismeer. I don't know if this is necessarily the entire Feywild. But my idea is, I think in the actual lore, the mother of Tasha and Skabatha and all of those characters, right, is not Zybilna, because Zybilna is another alias for Tasha. I know, confusing. We did a previous stream where we're trying to like figure all of this out, and it's just a big mess. But I think that the in-canon explanation is that their mother is the sort of like witch Baba Yaga. And Baba Yaga is cool, and I like Baba Yaga, and I like the idea of a witch who is older and more serious and more frightening than the couple of sort of like silly hags they've encountered so far. Like Skabatha and Bavlorna and Endlin all feel very petty, and I like the idea of like an old, patient, spider-like crone, a creature that has waited endless years lurking, sort of like Yogg, but like less of an agenda, more of a just kind of like a force of nature. So I like the idea that anyone who dies in Prismeer, sort of in a Norse way, falls into this lower realm, right? which is ruled over by Baba Yaga. Anyone who dies in Prismeer sinks into the earth, and it becomes the subject of Baba Yaga, who rules the lower realm. And then, you know, it's about convincing Baba Yaga why you should be let back into Prismeer, right? And so there's some element of like, God, the imagery I keep thinking of is like Pan's Labyrinth, right? Which like definitely has stuff in it that's not appropriate for kids, but the kind of fantastical elements I think are right or feel appropriate. Where like it's definitely fey, but it feels very dark and it feels very sinister, and I like that. I like the idea of like moss and rot, and you know mushrooms and roots, like all as motifs. You know, you're clearly like underground, you know, but not underground in like a dwarven way where it's stone. It's like earth and worms, you know, moss and rot and mushrooms and soil and earthworms. You know, this kind of like dank, wet, sort of like the if you picked up a boulder and looked underneath it, like what you would see down there, the kind of like wet, dewy, moist, slimy mud hole. I like all of that. It's a little similar to the swamp, but I think it's darker and more sinister. The swamp was kind of goofy. This is a little bit more ominous. I mean, honestly, saying Pan's Labyrinth makes me wonder if, like, the labyrinth is actually what it is. If it's some kind of a maze. And that also then, like, plays into the concept of labyrinth. A labyrinth beneath the earth that the characters, that Cyrus must traverse in order to bargain with Baba Yaga to return to Prismeer. I like the idea, like, is Baba Yaga Zybilna's mother? Ooh, David says something akin to the spirit world from Avatar: The Last Airbender in tone. Yeah, I think that's cool. The spirit world feels... Oh god, there's that horrible spider creature that has the different faces. Yeah. That's right, David. That's right. Here, let me move these around. I'm looking at the wrong thing. Chat should be over here. There we go. God, yeah, there's that weird, awful, like, caterpillar centipede monster with those faces. That honestly might be too scary, but like that's definitely the right tone. Yeah, centipede. Thank you. Yes, it's a centipede. Yeah, something like that is cool to me. I think I like the idea that it is not a spirit world. It is like, because I think it's like the spirit world in Avatar, which is a good touchstone. But I think it's I like the idea that it's imminently physical, right? It's like the labyrinth and Labyrinth. It's a very real physical problem that Baba Yaga, because it's not like Cyrus's soul left. Like they were literally grabbed and pulled into the earth, right? That like death is a physical place in the Feywild that you physically go to. Let me make a point about that. The lower realm is what I want to call it, like the under earth or something like that, right? Is a physical place that you go to, that you physically go to. Your body as well as your soul is trapped there. So there are two options. Like option A, Cyrus, you know, negotiates with Baba Yaga, manages to find negotiates Baba Yaga and convinces her to release her back onto Prismeer, potentially to free Zybilna. Like it would have to be in exchange for something, right? Like a classic hag deal. Option B is that the party gets to the unicorn and manages to resurrect Cyrus before then. right? And so it's kind of this like Cyrus's only hope is to deal with Baba Yaga, but because we're not separating them, like both player groups will be able to watch that, like the living players have to try to get to the unicorn and do all of that before Cyrus makes some like usurious deal with Baba Yaga, right? So it's partially about navigating the labyrinth, but then it's also, once you get to the center of the labyrinth, it's about it's about making a deal with her. So yeah, the structure of that then seems pretty simple, right? It seems like you just have them kind of navigate their way through this mossy, earthy labyrinth, and then along the way they encounter various challenges they have to try to overcome. God, I almost want to look up the plot of the movie Labyrinth and base some of them off of that. Like, it feels like there should be a riddle. I really like the idea of it having like the vibe of like a crawl space. It's akin to a crawl space. Always on hands and knees. You know, that you're like, like moving your way through. You've literally been pulled into the earth. Okay, so let me pull up Labyrinth, like the plot summary to Labyrinth, and see what we got. I know there's a riddle. There's the two doors, right? Labyrinth. Wikipedia. Because I don't think it would actually be that hard for me to pull up like an actual map of a labyrinth and just have them like, okay, you're crawling along. It might not look the way I want, I guess, which is a problem. No, not the real Labyrinth. The 1986 film Labyrinth. You guys understand. You know what I mean. Okay, the plot. So she goes there. Brother's been kidnapped by goblins. 13 hours to solve his labyrinth and find Toby before he's turned into a goblin forever. So I don't think that there's like a penalty for not completing it in time. I think it's just that like you have to like meet people that are still trapped. So like one of the things for sure has to be like a Labyrinth Encounters. Other characters that they've killed crawling around down here. So like Agden Longscarf is the character they killed. Is is trapped here. Definitely a riddle. No time limit. You just might be trapped here forever. Okay. So Sarah meets a dwarfish man named Hoggle who aids her to enter the labyrinth. She has trouble finding her way at first and meets a talking worm who inadvertently sends her in the wrong direction. Right, that's the two different ways. Boy, I never had to pronounce this word. It's a French word. Sarah ends up in it's like the dungeon with the where it's like a hole with the covering, like oubliette or whatever. I can never say that word. Oubliette? I don't know. No, it's not we, because it'd be like OUI, but I never know how to pronounce it. My wife has said it several times around me, and I was like, yeah, that. This is one of those where she reunites with Hoggle. The two are confronted by... Boy, yeah, they don't really describe these traps very well in here, these encounters. Okay. So there's... Boy, what is there? There's a riddle for sure. I like the idea of like a big toad. Oubliette? I think there's a we. I think there's because it's B-U-I. Oubliette? I think it's I'm just gonna look it up. I spent a lot of time with this. But yeah, I can never pronounce it. Oubliette. Pronunciation. Maybe it's just oubliette. She always says it weird. She's got a French degree, so. Oubliette. Oubliette. That's it. Oubliette. Yes, oubliette. So I like the idea of that there is a big toad that blocks the path forward, and that you must answer the riddle, because that's in Pan's Labyrinth. Isn't there like a big, horrible, horny toad in Pan's Labyrinth? Now I gotta look at Pan's Labyrinth. Okay. Blah, 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 the plot. Right, retrieving a key from the belly of a giant toad. That's right. Yeah. So I think that's what was in my head. And yeah, there is a scene in Pan's Labyrinth where she's like crawling around on the ground. That must have been what I was imagining. It's this like wet, slick tunnel. Okay, you must answer the riddle to advance, or go around, right? Or go around the toad. The only know the labyrinth with the door riddle. Yeah, okay, no worries. But I think you do something similar here. I still think about, like, I did that riddle once in a dungeon that was like intentionally designed as like a puzzle box, right? It was based on a Rubik's Cube, and you know it would rotate based on what chamber they were in. The idea when I did do that one, because everything was very arched, like everything was clearly like it was kind of like a mad wizard designed it, you know, the Trials of Uptao. I still think about this. I did it where it's that same thing, right? It's like one of us is lying and one of us is telling the truth, and it's like two floating heads, right? Basically flame skulls. Which one is the liar and which one is telling the truth? And they like, you know, they use the labyrinth deduction and they get it right. And then the one that they say, you're the liar, goes, are you calling me a liar? And then it was a fight. So it was, it was just like, you know, the point of it, yeah, you should solve it. But when you do solve it, because it's easy and everyone knows that one, right, how to do it. It's like entered the cultural consciousness, right? It's like, it creates this other challenge. But there's some riddle, I don't know what it is. A riddle feels very Feywild to me. But you deal with that. You have to go around it. I'm trying to think, like, do I want a combat encounter? I kind of feel like if you're crawling your way along, you know, you maybe shouldn't have a combat, because, like, what are you going to do down there? You know, how many hit points do you have? Ostensibly, you're dead, right? So, like, what are your, like... What are your capabilities? You can roll skill checks for sure. So some kind of a skill challengey thing could make sense. I know there's like stench in the labyrinth. A terrain effect with stench. How can you die again in the Feywild? Oh, I see what you're saying. How can you die again? Yeah, like what if like a combat encounter doesn't feel right because, yeah, I see what you're saying. I thought you were just asking a question. Yeah, how can you die a second time? Exactly, right? It's like, why have hit points if you're already dead? So it's got to be challenge you in other ways. It's like delays and, you know, all these other things. The danger isn't that you die, is that you get trapped there, right? And that you never escape. So I like the idea of seeing somebody like Angdon Longscarf, the Heron... I mean, the Heron brigand that they beat in the swamp is like still trapped down here, right? It hasn't been able to escape. So terrain effect with stench or gas or something like that, right? That like puts you to sleep or gives you disadvantage because you're hacking and coughing, you know. Like some kind of a skill challenge. Skill challenge. You must sneak past something, or does the toad eat you if you guess incorrectly? Yeah, I like that a lot, David. It'd be fun if they had to work with old enemies to get out. So like Agdon, does Agdon know something? Does he promise to help only if they work together? You know, like, does he promise to tell her, yeah, that they have to kind of like collaborate with an old bad guy? I think is cool. I like the toad eating you being much more like you're swallowed and much less like, you know, oh, you take damage. It's just now you're trapped inside the toad. Okay. Pan's Labyrinth also has like the room with the all the food, right? You're not supposed to eat. Like some kind of temptation thing like that is cool. Like anything that will like waste Cyrus's time, I think is good. There's a really cool trap in Curse of Strahd that I like, where there is this like this stone idol, this kind of like black obsidian idol in the Amber Temple. And the conceit with it is that when you see it, right, you have to make a wisdom saving throw, or you just stare at it, right? You like drop to your knees in front of it and just stare at it. But what's cool is that there is no ending effect on it. So if you fail that save, like if somebody shakes you, right, it's like an action to shake them. I think when you see it, like if you succeed on it, then it has no effect on you. You're just like, that's a weird idol, I don't care. If you fail, yeah, the waiting room, Beetlejuice, yeah, that's very bureaucratic, right? But that might be a good scene to look at. I'm wondering, ooh, that's a cool idea. Like, I don't know, because I'm trying to think, like, what is Baba Yaga's like thing? Like, what is her like her aesthetic? Anyway, so the Curse of Strahd thing is that like you look at this idol, and if you fail your wisdom saving throw, you stare at it, but it never naturally expires. So only if someone shakes you out of it can you be freed from it. And I remember running it where I had a character look at it, fail the save, and then just stare at this statue forever, like for the entire session, until the rest of the party, because they had been separated for whatever reason, until the rest of the party came and found them, and thankfully they weren't all mesmerized by it. But the idea that like you could theoretically have a TPK by having the entire party go into this room and just stare at this statue for the rest, and like, you know, you die of starvation. Like there are skeletons on the floor of this room of people who have just stared at the statue forever, and that's it, right? Like, which was so scary to me. So like something kind of like along those lines is interesting, but I don't know like what the, maybe there's I like the idea of like a banquet full of food. Again, to make that Pan's Labyrinth reference, you must make a saving throw. On a failure, you're compelled to eat it. Once you start eating it, it keeps replenishing, and you can't stop eating. So like you just kind of get stuck perpetually eating this food, you know. And I like the contrast of that, if you're crawling on hands and knees through these wet tunnels, finding like a beautifully laid out banquet table with all this food on it, right? Like, yeah, that's cool. I like that. It feels like, you know, it's obviously you're very suspicious of it, but it kind of draws you in. Trying to think of like 3 to 5 other little things that they could encounter. And then we should talk about Baba Yaga and like what her deal is. So like I want something that like feels like a combat encounter, like a monster, but isn't one. You know? It'd be cool to encounter a couple of other people that they've defeated. So I'm trying to think like other people that they fought. They didn't defeat Bevlorna. They did defeat some red caps. Yeah, so let's put like enemies. Red caps, Agden, Longscarf. Like one more would be good. Who else have they fought? Fought the Herringons. They fought some mud methods. Yeah. Okay. That seems like enough. So Agden, like, is a potential ally. The only like really named NPC down here. What is like? See, he's like a brigand. Maybe like, and he's got a famous song. She hears the song quietly being sung. He's, you know, dejected and crying and hopeless. I'm trying to think. What could he provide? He does have like an endless scarf is like his thing. So maybe he could use that as like yarn or whatever, right? If Cyrus allies with Agden, they could use his extremely long scarf to... Ooh, David coming in with the clutch. David says, I forget, is the whole reason they're here to find their real parents. Could one of the other players' parents end up down here too? That's really good. The only thing that doesn't work about that, because I love that, the only thing that doesn't work about it, so we have to find a workaround, is that in my version of... So in the book as published, there's a mechanic, which I think is there kind of like as an anti-safety tool, or it's like, not anti, but like as a built-in safety tool, that says that children in the Feywild can't be harmed. The way that they do it is that if anything bad would like hurt a child, the child is like teleported to like a safe demiplane, which doesn't make sense to me because like then they're just trapped there until Zybilna is freed. So actually there'd be like tons of children trapped on this demiplane. It's weird. So I have come up with a similar mechanic, but it's different. It's actually something I developed for a previous monster that I made for Daily Bestiary called the Wild Child, where basically they're just like children are immune to damage in the Feywild. And so the conceit is that when the parents come through the portal, they are turned into children because that is their idealized self. Like the parents want to be kids because that's, they remember being happier and whatever, right? They didn't have all these adult responsibilities. So they are all turned into children, which means they are immune to damage. They are currently the prisoners of Skabatha because she uses children in her factory because they can't be hurt, right? Is kind of how I've justified it. But I like the idea of that. Boy, I'm trying to think who it would be, but that's a really good one, David. There is... Yeah. It would be extra complicated, but maybe one of the options, rather than the methods, is Sumac. So Sumac is the father of Cinnamon, the party's Yuanti Ranger. Father of Cinnamon, the party's Yuanti Ranger. Sumac is currently trapped in their snake form. There was a whole bunch of weirdness with Sumac being turned into leaves and stuff like that, so there's some precedent for it. Is Sumac's true form actually imprisoned in the realm below, in the lower realm? That could be interesting. I don't hate that. I'm not sure how I would work it in, but I think it's cool to find their way out of the labyrinth. Okay. So the red caps are antagonistic. I like the idea of like skeletons or something, like decrepit old skeletons trapped down here forever, slowly growing into the walls that mock and taunt the characters as they crawl past. The danger here is not that they'll attack or really even demotivate the players, but instead they're NPC allies. Right? That like they're crawling along and these skeletons who are other Fae or whatever who've gotten trapped down here potentially, or they're just, malign entities, kind of mock them and say, you'll be trapped down here like us forever, and how, it's foolish to try, and like that kind of a thing, and that like it has an effect on Agden or potentially on Sumac or the Redcaps or whoever they're with, right? But it theoretically it won't affect Cyrus. I wouldn't make it a mechanic. I think it would just be persuasive to the other people that they're with, and then Cyrus has to decide either to abandon them or to try to convince them, no, let's keep going, right? That's cool. I want more of like a puzzle or something. We have a riddle, we have some NPCs. I like the idea of a puzzle I want something that feels like a combat encounter, but isn't quite a combat encounter. Like I want like a monster. Like I want something that's like hunting them down here, like a grave worm or something like that, you know? Maybe that's the toad, is that like there's a monster that swallows you and then you get stuck inside of it. It's the thing that's burrowed these tunnels, this like grave worm. A grave worm that slithers along and swallows any character that it comes across. This is the true danger of the labyrinth. If swallowed by the grave worm, you can never escape. Is this where Cyrus finds sumac? Yeah, that's cool. So we would lose that on the toad. Toad would not have that. I want like one. I want a good puzzle. We have a riddle. We have some NPCs to interact with. We have a monster. We have like a trap with like the stench or whatever. I want a riddle or a puzzle. So like you have to move things or like adjust stuff. You know, it's normally like, hey, what's up, Nuker Wolf? So like some kind of an interesting. It could be in some way connected to solving the labyrinth, right? That like, you know, there could be a collection of keys that you have to get, but that feels very video game. All puzzles, I guess, are kind of video gamey. A puzzle. It's tricky because you're already saying, all right, the whole dungeon is them like crawling around on their hands and knees down here, you know? So your like field of motion is pretty limited. You can't do anything too crazy. And you don't want anything like mechanical, right? You don't want any like levers and stuff like that. You want something that feels right to the tone. You know, it could be there's a locked door or something and you need a key, but it feels like that would just be searching around in the mud, right? It was like, how do you solve it? What they need to find is inside the worm. Could be, but then it relies on them getting like swallowed. There's no reason for them to think that it's there. I like the idea that like there is a reward inside the worm if they do get swallowed, but I think it's a story reward of one of the character's parents, right? This is like such an insane campaign. Like if you stop and think about what we're discussing, right? It's like so abstract and weird. But this is what happens whenever I run games. Like I ran my Curse of Strahd game is like so far off the beaten path at this point. I've got invented holidays and they're traveling around with like a possessed girl and like all of this stuff. It's like so different from what's written. This is always what happens in the games I run though. They spin out of control. God, I want a puzzle. But I don't want it to be just like mechanical levers, you know. I want it to feel fairy tale and kind of whimsical, but also sort of scary. I'm trying to think of like fairy tale stuff. So like Snow White has like poisoned apples. It's got the heart in a box, you know. It's got the dwarves, I guess. Cinderella has the shoe. Cinderella has the mice. Brew a potion is kind of interesting, like a cauldron. Ooh, I don't hate that. That's kind of good. Brew a potion. Puzzle. Brew a potion? Because it could be something about like, yeah. Mix, oops, that's the wrong place for that. Oh, that's all under enemies. Let's go here. Puzzle. Brew a potion. So how do you like Baba Yaga? is at the center of the labyrinth, right? Is the conceit. And the puzzle would ostensibly, like, open up an area, or does it summon her? I feel like... I kind of like that. I kind of like, at the center of the labyrinth is a cauldron. At the center of the labyrinth is a cauldron. In order to summon Baba Yaga, Cyrus must brew a particular potion in that cauldron. A lot of symbolism, a lot of like symbolic items could be lots of things that are needed for the potion. Like what kind of things are you thinking, Nuclear Wolf? Because like my instinct, of course, is to obviously immediately do like Eye of Newt, but you could make a point about all the things that you need for the potion are things that, like, I like the reveal of, okay, you crawl around in the labyrinth for a little while, right? That's cool. I don't hate that, David, having be a little wiggly, but I like the idea of you crawl around in the labyrinth for a little while, and you see various things, right? Like, you know, let's say at one point you see a one-eyed newt, you know, and you see a bat with one wing or whatever, you know what I mean? Like something like that. Like you see the ingredients, you know, let's say it's a purple mushroom and the frog the big toad has like purple mushrooms growing on its head. So like you see several of the ingredients before you realize that you need them. And then you get to the center and you're like, oh God, now I gotta go back and get those things, right? But I don't know how they would know that they need to do that. You know, there could be like a note, but why would Baba Yaga put a note down there? Like, I like the idea that like it's less that the potion like summons her, and it's almost more that it like creates her. You know, that she is this like kind of goopy. The potion doesn't summon Baba Yaga. It creates her in a sense. Feywild magic, like something kissed by the sun, the kind of nonsense that Feywild. Sure, but that's kind of cool. It's just the question is like you'd have to be down here, you know, in the lower realm, like you're already in the afterlife. So what kinds of things would you find in this like dank, wet, earthy, mossy tunnel? It creates her in a goopy, smoky, like simulacrum that you can speak to. You know, she like rises up out of the cauldron. Because I was imagining, you know, like a door opens and you go into her walking hut or whatever. But I kind of like her coming out of the gunk. Some Baba Yaga creates her in a goopy, smoking simulacrum that you can speak to. So what are the ingredients to this potion? I like the idea that it requires, you know, 3 is a nice round number. It's not actually round, but you understand. 3. So what are the ones in Macbeth? Because it might be kind of cool to like incorporate those. It's like Eye of Newt, Toe of Frog, Wool of Bat, and Tongue of Dog. Which I believe actually refer to Snips and Snails and Puppy Dog Tails. That's what little boys are made of. But what is Baba Yaga made of? Those are rare terms are refer to plants. Eye of Newt is a pseudonym for mustard seed. Let me see if I can find. So it could be that, right? It could be that, like, you need the actual plants. So it's Eye of Newt, Toe of Frog, Wool of Bat, Tongue of Dog, Adder's Fork, Blindworm's Sting, Lizard's Leg, and Howlet's Wing. So the question is, like, what are the... Here they are. So Eye of Newt is mustard seed, Toe of Frog is buttercup, Wool of Bat is moss, Hound of Dog is Hound's Tongue. Tongue of Dog is Hound's Tongue, sure. Adder's Fork is Adder's Tongue, which is a type of fern. Blindworm's Sting is Knotweed. Lizard's Leg is Ivy. Howlet's Wing is Garlic. And Fillet of Fenny Snake is Jack in the Pulpit. So those are the actual plants that they're in reference to. So like, but what's the puzzle element to it, right? Like, is it just you make some nature checks and you find the things, or is it a little bit more like I like the idea of like herb lore being the thing that gets you out of there, but it seems a little too like I want some element of kind of what Nuker Wolf is hinting at there with kind of like Feywild whimsy, you know, just saying that like, hey, these are actually references to real types of plants is a little too botanical almost, you know. I don't hate the idea of it, because the kid isn't going to figure this out unless it's basically explained to them. This is an 11-year-old, right? It could just have like the cauldron maybe has stuff on the side of it, like embossed with images, right? These are the things that you need. But then you'd have to like you'd basically have to cue them, you know, because I could see on the side of the cauldron is an embossed image of like a newt with you know, a gemstone for an eye, you know, and then there's on one side there's an embossed image of a frog with like a jeweled like webbed foot, you know what I mean? But then you'd still have to like cue them to roll a check for that. I love the idea of brewing a potion in a cauldron. Like, that feels very appropriate. But I don't know what that, like, how do I get them to do that? How do I cue them in on it? There wouldn't be anyone. I like that it's like, it's empty. There's no one in, like, the room with the cauldron. It's there alone. And it's, you know, got boiling water in it, but none of the ingredients. And they have to put the ingredients in. You could make a point about, like, if it's just, like, generic stuff, if it's just, like, there's a flower, there's, like, a purple flower and a red flower and a yellow flower and a green flower that you see as you're crawling around, or they could be mushrooms or whatever, right? Rather than getting, like, very specific about the types of things that they are. Yeah, maybe that's it. So maybe it's, like, each one of these places, each one of these locations has a certain type of mushroom. And you make a point about, like, on top of the toad's body is sprouting with purple mushrooms, and the stench comes from a patch of red mushrooms, and the banquet has, you know, a dish made from green mushrooms, and there's one other one, maybe the skeletons. The skeletons have blue mushrooms growing on their bones. You know, they're like all kind of seedy with these blue mushrooms. One mushroom of each type: red, green, blue, purple. Or maybe like three total mushrooms, and maybe there's like of any three colors summons Baba Yaga, but they have to be different. So maybe there's like one more set. It could be with the Grave Worm, but the Grave Worm again feels like it's a punishment. Agden could have one. The red caps also. Yeah, maybe the red caps are guarding the red mushrooms, believing them to be important, but not knowing how or why. So then these are, we have green, purple, yellow mushrooms. Yeah, okay. So then the task then falls to me that, like, as they're crawling, and it's, again, like, I would like to do something a little sillier, like Nuka Wolf is describing, but I'm just worried about this kid in particular who's trapped in the underworld not being able to figure out the puzzle. Like, I think if I make it kind of clear, like, yeah, there are these weird kind of conspicuous purple mushrooms. Oh yeah, you notice these green mushrooms. Like, I keep making a point of these mushrooms being important, that I think eventually they might not grab them the first time, but then when they get to the center and they realize they have to use mushrooms in this stew, in this cauldron, that then hopefully they will flash back on those mushrooms. And I can have the, like, cauldron have embossed with the shape of different mushrooms. The cauldron is embossed with the shape of different mushrooms. Ooh, you know what? There actually are a bunch of mushrooms in the... Ooh, yeah, in Wild Beyond the Witchlight. Maybe it's that I pull those out, and then that's what's embossed along the edges of the cauldron. Okay, that's cool. I think that's fine. So what I'll do is I will design a little labyrinth map, right? And then I will put these little encounters in various places. So there's the big toad, and then there's the red caps, and there's the skeletons, and the, like, mushroom grove of the kind of, like, stinking mushrooms, and there's the banquet, and there's, you know, all of the different various threats and stuff. I'll make a token for the grave worm, and I'll move it along to kind of follow them, right? Putting it on the opposite side, and as they kind of crawl their way through the maze, the grave worm will get closer and closer to them, blah, blah, blah. We'll do all of that. That'll work fine. Cool. So the question then is, if they get to Baba Yaga, and they put the stuff in there, and she appears, how do they convince her? Like, what is that scene like? I like the idea of her kind of being this creature that, like, appears almost like flu powder or whatever, right? She appears in the cauldron. Baba Yaga, summoned by the potion. Baba Yaga is dripping, is not truly there, but instead appears as an apparition. As an apparition made from the bubbling goop of the cauldron. She is irritated at being disturbed and has no intention of freeing anyone from her dank, wet abode. I think that, like, the backstory is that she's Zybilna's mother, the grandmother of the Hourglass Coven and of Tasha. She was imprisoned in the lower realms due to a bad deal she made with the Archfey, like with the Summer Court or whatever, right? And now seeks aeons and aeons ago. How do you talk your way past her? So, you know, she considers you her subject, that this is the realm that she rules, and you're basically trying to leave. Why would she allow that? She's Zybilna's mother, but does she care enough about Zybilna? Like, I think one avenue, there are three ways to convince her. So the easiest way, and the way they'll probably do, is Zybilna is trapped, and her daughters and her sisters have turned against her, or her daughters have turned against her. Daughters have turned against her. Baba Yaga will free the character if they swear to free Zybilna. Zybilna
this has a Gesh effect if they don't take action every session to further freeing Sibilna. They are punished and brought back down into her lair or something, right? Like they take damage. That's one way to do it, is to offer that, but I think you'd have to know to do that. You can enter into a deal with Baba Yaga. She will give you back your life in exchange for something of equal value. So the question is, right, what does she want? I like the idea that Baba Yaga wants freedom from this bad deal that she made, but she can't just, like, escape permanently. That it's like, you know, you have to give up something intangible. So, you know, laughter or whatever. But in each case, Baba Yaga will exploit that for some better purpose on her end. You know, kind of like Ursula and her voice. You know what I mean? So, like, one idea I have is, like, a good night's sleep. It's one of the things you can give her. And if they select this, then Baba Yaga controls the character's body whenever they fall asleep and uses it to get up to mischief in Prismere, something like that. You know, like that kind of a thing where, like, you make an agreement for, like, I guess it doesn't sound so bad, I have to stay up one night, okay, but actually it's some worse deal. Like, you have your body back, but then Baba Yaga has, like, a hook in you somehow. I gotta think of a couple of other ones that are like that, where, again, something intangible, but, like, you know, good night's sleep is a, so, like, then she has some agency back on the material plane on the Feywild, right? Good night's sleep. I like your voice or your laughter or, like, some kind of a thing that would be, like, your voice feels so classic Little Mermaid, but I don't know how. Maybe it's like your voice. If you give up, if they select this, they can no longer talk. But Baba Yaga can speak through them, essentially putting her in every scene. I like that. I want one more that's, like, again, in this kind of in this sort of a vein, right? That gives Baba Yaga some, like, control over the scene. You're thinking about, like, Futurama, right? The Devil's Hands. That's not quite right either. So you could do, like, your eye, right? Then she swaps out the eye with her own eye. And then she can see stuff, but what good is that, you know? There's one in my Curse of Strahd game that I really like, where one of the characters made a deal with the hag at one point. Yeah, I want to see the world through your eye. Which I think is good, but I feel like it doesn't... I don't know what the payoff of that is. A memory is cool, but how does she exploit it? You know? Yeah, see, Newkirk? We got there. Exactly. I don't know how it can be used either. I like it. I like the idea of something like that. The players, I don't think... Like, a memory is a good role-playing one. I don't think that the players will go for it, because they might go for it, but it's not going to be ultimately like satisfying, because they don't care about that stuff. They're not really as into the backstory and the like acting portion of it and like playing the character, you know. It's gonna be something like that though. Like, we're on the right track. It's just a matter of like, what is the good one? How would Baba Yaga like exploit it? You know, there's one I have in my Chris Strahd game that I like where the hag doesn't exploit it in the same way, but in that way that it comes back to bite you is that there's a hag made a deal with one of my players, and basically that character gave up their reflection, and that Baba Yaga turned it into a copy of them that they could use for their own sinister purposes. But what they don't realize is that there's like a plot element later where they have to pass through a magic mirror, right? And you can't pass through it unless you have a reflection. Which I think is great, and I'm excited for them to realize that. Maybe something they have as adults but not as kids, like their future as that class. Ooh, that's kind of cool. Maybe time from their life, like a minute or something. And then she can use the character for that time at the most opportune moment. Ooh. Yeah, but I think it's okay if it takes away agency in a small way. A minute of your time? That's pretty good. A minute of your time. If they select this, then Baba Yaga can briefly take over their body for 10 rounds whenever she chooses, but only once, right? It's like, I actually really like a minute of your time. That's great. It does say with their agency, but I think the point is that, like, you agreed to it, right? That, like, this is how a hag manipulates you. And, you know, I think taking away agency is bad only in the context of, like, doing something bad with it. Like, I think, you know, people talk about charm making them uncomfortable, and if that makes anyone uncomfortable in D&D, like, that's totally valid. But, like, to me, it's only creepy if you use it creepily, right? Like, if someone is charmed and they attack their ally, it's a perfectly, like, normal D&D thing to do. But I think that's a great way to do. It's a great way to do that, where it seems like all I want is a minute of your time, and it's perfectly whimsical and perfectly Feywild, and then I can choose a good moment. My question would then just be like, what is Baba Yaga's goal? But that's something I could figure out at a future date. I think that's great, everybody. I'm really happy with that, actually. So basically, what happens when you die is you go down into, I need a cool name for it, like the labyrinth below or the maze below. Yeah, this is a consequence that can help Baba not hurt the party or the character. And, like, it could hurt the party or the character depending on how they do it, but it wouldn't, like, hurt the player, right? Like, hopefully. I don't think it'd be super bad. I love that, Dave. That's a great one. Good thinking. Yeah. A minute of your time. Very cool. I like that it's just once. Like, then there's something very interesting narratively about that then I have to pick, like, what is Baba Yaga's time, right? When is that appropriate? And it might be fun at some point then, as a plot point, that another character comes back, right? Maybe Agdon Longscarf or another villain that they defeat shows up again, right? Under those same circumstances, and then Baba Yaga, because Baba Yaga is piloting them or whatever, right? That could be cool. Great. So what happens is you go down to this lower realm, you crawl around through this maze, you have to get to the center, brew the potion to summon Baba Yaga, make a deal with her. Either the party manages to get them out through the unicorn's magic, or they have to make a deal either about Zybilna, which is most likely what they'll do, or potentially make a bargain with her. She won't offer up the Zybilna option because she doesn't know what's going on, but if they tell her, like, they think to say, hey, I'm trying to save Zybilna, right? But if they just say, I'm just trying to rescue my parents, she doesn't care about that. That's meaningless to her. It's got to be about Zybilna, or she offers to make a deal. Like, I will give you back your life in exchange for one of these three things, right? Yeah, that's cool. I'm into that. I think that's it. I honestly think we might call it. That's a little early, but this is the main thing I had to figure out. Now, honestly, I could use this time to do the map and stuff, which needs to be done if they're going to be crawling around down there. So I might call it, folks. That was really cool, though. I think this is going to be fun. I'm excited because I have the rest of the session ready to go. It's just a matter of getting this kind of component of it, of Cyrus crawling around in the underworld, figuring out where they need to go. Yeah, cool. I love it.
Thank you so much for coming, everybody. Thanks, David and Nukarov. A little shorter of a stream, but we're getting back into it. We're kind of swinging back into how this works. Really appreciate all your suggestions. Loved. There are a lot of really great ideas in here. David, in particular, had a couple of really nice ones, both with Sumac as a plot point and with David, or with I think with David. That's your name. Or with the Minute of Your Time. I just thought about this too. Is that like if they do want to bring Agden or Sumac with them, then maybe they have to give up all three, or each one of them has to give up one of the other choices, right? That like if Sumac wants to come through, maybe Sumac has to give up a minute of his time or his voice or whatever it is. That's cool. I like that. Cool. I love it. So that is going to wrap up our stream today. We will be back for sure on Thursday. I have a stream. We're going to talk about demons again, and we're going to do some monster redesign for 4 of the demons in the monster manual. That is going to be the, let's see if I can get these. The Barwagura, the Chasmi, the Shadow Demon, and the Vrock are all next week, or all on Thursday, same time, 2 p.m. We'll be redesigning those monsters. I'm off this Sunday. I should be streaming on Saturday to do some Sea of Thieves. I'm off on Sunday because I've got double games. I would love to get back to world building on Sundays. Probably not dwarves, but we might do some orc stuff because my home game is getting right into that. A lot of orc related things, and I would love to do some world building on that. Great, but I think that's going to wrap it up for us here. If you like the stream, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel if you're not already. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at ProDMTimothy. I've got a Discord. I've got a Patreon, a bunch of all kinds of cool stuff where you can come and see more content that I'm putting out. But thank you so much for watching. I will talk to you guys next week. Thanks, Nuker. Thanks, David. It was always a pleasure hanging out. I'm excited to do more of it. And until next time, happy adventuring.